in all your story of the Mises Institute, can you tell us what is the Mises Institute goals in the society?
Well, I would say it's twofold. The really specific goal is to train up a generation of economists who can really understand what's on in the world and prevent some of the economic catastrophes that we've seen just even in recent years. And in particular, we want to train people in a particular school of thought, the Austrian School of Economics. It can boast many geniuses, many great minds, and it has a lot to tell us today. So we want to place professors who believe in this in universities. But the more broad and general goal is to reach not just academics, but the general public and show and teach them about a free society, how it works economically, but also how it works socially, and how our whole worldview is consistent. It's a worldview based on the idea that each person owns himself and the property that he justly acquires. Nobody may invade anyone else's property or person, or otherwise they have to be punished and make restitution, and that on the basis of these simple principles, the result is a society of tremendous wealth and opportunity and very high standard of living.
Great. In this, like, 30 years of the, almost, yeah, probably more than 30 years of the Mises Institute, have you noticed any change in the society? Have you noticed the influence of the Mises Institute?
Little by little, yes. I mean, just today, Walter Block at one of his talks was saying that back in 1966, if you were to ask how many, in fact, he did ask Murray Rothbard, who was helped to found the Mises Institute, how many libertarians are there in the world? And in the entire world, there were, in Rothbard's estimation, 25 libertarians. Now, it's true that Austrian economics and libertarianism are not the same thing, but they are at the very least friendly cousins, we might say. And today, there are many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of libertarians. Well, I think the Mises Institute has played a tremendous role, especially since the Internet was created. The Institute has been such a benefactor to mankind, these great classic works that are so intellectually exciting about that teach that what you've been taught in school about how terrible it would be if wise experts weren't overseeing everything. You learn how society really can run itself. It's very exciting. And anyone anywhere in the world can read any of these books or take any of these courses or listen to these lectures and hear some of these interviews. When I talk to people and I say, how did you first get to know about these ideas? Over and over again, it's the Mises Institute, the Mises Institute, the Mises Institute. And today, it's true, not every economics department, but in a lot of economics departments in American universities, if you are an Austrian so-called economist, they oftentimes view that as an interesting addition to the department. They don't say, well, there's no chance we'll hire you. We have professors being hired all over the country, and that was not happening before the Mises Institute, period. That was not happening.
How has it changed the attendance of in the Mises University in the last 30 years? Because in this year it's like its 30th birthday of the Mises University. Has it changed? Do we have more kids and young people coming to the Mises University?
That's a good question. That I personally don't know. I'm sure the people who run the institute would know. I can say, though, that as somebody who went to the Mises University as a student 23 years ago, and I think back on it, I would say there are more students today. But I would also say the students we have today are also qualitatively different. It's not just a different quantity of students, but they're better students. And the reason, again, is that because of the Internet, they can read this material, they can master this material, and they can show up here wanting then just to become advanced students. They don't show up as complete beginners, knowing nothing, and we need to teach from there. We have a lot of students who know an enormous amount just when they walk through that door.
They already come with a background of libertarian ideas and Austrian economics knowledge.
Yeah. So it's we couldn't be happier. And I've been talking to the faculty this week, and they're all saying to each other, this is such an exciting bunch of students because they know a lot, they're curious, they love learning. We have an optional exam at the end of the week. Now, these kids are already coming to an academic week-long conference in the middle of the summer, and they don't have to take the exam, but the room was packed full of people who want to take that exam. Now, I should point out in all fairness that if you pass the exam and you move on to the oral exam portion, and you do very well there and you move to the final oral exam, you do have the chance to win a cash prize. So there is a chance that that is also a motivation.
That could be. Before I started the interview, I asked in Chile about to libertarians if they wanted to make any question to you, and some people actually asked me for some question. There is a guy called Agustin Calderon who asked what I think is a very basic question, but it's essential to understand, especially in Chile where the movement is not very unknown. And the question is this: the libertarian movement in Chile is still small and very unknown. A basic but important question is, what does a libertarian defend? A free market that is commonly known with buying and selling goods and services, or an ethic of self-possession?
Okay. So in other words, the question is, most of our countrymen are not libertarians, or maybe don't even know what libertarianism is.
Yeah.
So if I want to approach them and I want to increase our numbers, how should I be explaining it? What should be the fundamental principle that I want to convey? Is that what he's saying?
What does a libertarian defend? The market, the self-possession of a person? What is?
Well, I would say the market really is secondary. The market follows from the first principles. So the first principles, it's true there are libertarians with differences of opinion on this, but to me the first principle is the idea of self-ownership. And the idea ownership of any property means that you can use it as you see fit as long as you don't harm anybody else. So if I own these glasses, I am the one who decides when they go on my face, and nobody else makes that decision. Well, likewise, if I own myself, then I decide the things I'm going to do, or if I want to donate a kidney, that's my decision. People can't come up and say, well, that poor guy could use a kidney, so we're going to start grabbing it from you. These would be my decisions. And so when I begin there, everything else libertarianism believes follows from that. A free market follows from that, because in the free market we have everybody owning himself and making decisions about how he wants to interact with other people, what kind of labor contract he wants to enter into, what kind of products he wants to produce or consume or buy or sell. But it ultimately goes down to this question of who owns you. I mean, if you really, really want to get people thinking, because they never think of issues like this, the question might be, who owns you? And they want to say, well, I own myself, but then they also want to say, but if the government wants to send me off to fight a war, it can do that. Well, then who owns you? That's the question.
Or if you can get married with a person of the same sex or different sex.
The question is who, again, it's just who owns you? Who can be making decisions for you is where it, and by the way, from there, of course, a lot of people are worried that, well, they say, that sounds very nice, and superficially, that sounds like a good idea. Everybody owns himself. No one can tell anybody else what to do. But they say, but the poor will be neglected and we'll have all this impoverishment. And that's a whole other question. But I will say that if you look in the world at the poor and you say, where in the world are the poor doing the best? Where are they suffering the fewest deprivations? And it's always in the countries that have the most capitalism. Always and everywhere. The most economically free countries also have a poor population that is suffering the least in terms of material goods. I don't think that's a coincidence, and I can explain why it's not a coincidence, but the point is, you shouldn't fear that the poor won't be cared for. You should be glad to know that under this system, they will enjoy material comfort at a level that the greatest kings of Europe did not enjoy.
Do you say in the beginning of the interview, in your second law, I believe, that the left doesn't like the libertarian movement at all? But actually, the conservatives as well have problem with the libertarian. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Why are they afraid of the freedom?
Yeah, okay. I have a little bit of sympathy, and a lot of frustration with conservatives because I came from that tradition. So when I hear them talk, I can hear my old self talking.
Me too.
Oh my goodness. Well, of course, as you know, they are willing to accept some libertarian ideas, and they say they like
Some free market.
right. They like private property. They realize that private property can be a conservative thing, but they feel that, and I don't want to make it sound like these are frivolous or stupid people because they're not. A lot. I mean, some of them are, but some of them are very smart people I've learned a lot from, and they feel like if there isn't some kind of authority, let's say giving moral guidance to people or something, that society is going to degenerate morally, and that when it degenerates morally, you can't have a free market. You'll have a bunch of dissolute people who are just seeking physical pleasure, and they just don't think you can have a society based on that. But my answer to that is, well, I also believe in moral principles, but it does not follow that the state has to be the institution that inculcates moral principles in people. Why can't it be families or your church or your personal philosophy or whatever it is? But why do they automatically assume it has to be the state? And secondly, it seems to me to be the case that once a people becomes, morally degenerate in some way, or they're lazy bums or whatever, it never seems like politics is ever able to change that. If you want to change the moral standing of a people, you have to go about it some other way. You have to go about it through education, moral exhortation, whatever. But passing a law, it just doesn't do anything. It doesn't accomplish anything. And even when I think about abortion's a controversial issue among libertarians, and there are a lot of conservatives who are against abortion, some libertarians who are against abortion. But as Jeff Deist of the Mises Institute has said, whatever your position on abortion is, if you think about all the tens of millions of dollars, maybe more than that, of dollars that conservatives have spent fighting for pro-life politicians who are going to stop abortion, and they've accomplished nothing, absolutely not one thing in 40 years, nothing. What if they had taken that money and devoted it to helping young mothers? And donating resources to young mothers who would like to have that baby, but they don't know what to do, and help them find employment. That would have had such an immeasurably better effect. And
there are a million ways to use that money in a better way.
Exactly. And so I would say to conservatives that you have been scammed by people. You've been scammed by slick politicians, by think tanks that are urging you to send money, and you send the money and nothing ever changes except you get a more insistent letter asking you to send more money. Think about what you can accomplish outside of government, because government hasn't given you a darn thing. Think about what the ordinary operation of society can yield you. Well, what if you just try voluntary methods? So there's that. But also, look, I'm an extremely, in English we say I'm an extremely square person, by which we mean, I don't use drugs. I drive a minivan with my 5 kids in it. Very conservative in that way. But I'm still a libertarian.
Conservative.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But I think of myself as a conservative in that way. But I still don't support the state because I feel like the state undermines me at every turn. It's implicitly forcing my kids to be educated in principles I don't agree with. It's undermining me through taxation. It's making my life difficult in various ways. If I could just have my nice little community and make my own decisions about my family and what they're taught and everything, that would be everything a conservative could possibly ask for. But I think some of the conservatives feel like we need to shape people up with the state. And I would say, look, if you can have a family, an extended family, a community that you feel like is a good, comfortable place to live in, be thankful for that and be content with that. Don't try to change people in San Francisco. Don't, write articles if you want to, but just fix up your own family, your own neighborhood, and be happy with your little plot of ground on this earth. And that is all you can expect in this life.